They said my voice sounded like peace. At first I thought it was a kindness, a small grace from strangers who'd heard me pray. Then one day, in a crowded mall, I heard my own voice playing over speakers, selling incense and headphones. The prayer I whispered before dawn was now background noise for shopping carts. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the silence that followed, the part they had cut out, the part where I breathed, trembled, and asked forgiveness for things I could not name. They call it divine ASMR. Millions listen to it each night, and I, Sister Maria, don't even own the sound of my own faith anymore. But tonight I will pray once more, not to be heard, but to be forgotten. I wake before the sun, when Manila still remembers how to be quiet. It's the only hour when jeepneys rest, roosters hesitate, and the thin line between night and morning loosens its grip. I sit on the cool tiles of our chapel and let my knees find their old ache. Breath in, breath out. A slow counting. My voice arrives last. It always does. I never rush it. I learned to wait for sound the way fishermen watch the tide. Patient, grateful, small. I am Sister Maria of St. Therese Home for Girls. We run a shelter for children who arrive with bruised memories and quick eyes. By day, I teach them the litany of small survivals, how to boil rice without burning, how to read a bus route, how to fold a blanket into a soft tomorrow. At night, when the dormitory's fans hum like a low sea, I stay in the chapel and keep vigil for the ones who startle at thunder. I do not heal, I accompany. That is enough. I did not join because I am holy. I joined because I am noisy inside. I wanted walls that understand my noise and answer back with silence. The discipline helps. The uniform, the schedule, the prayers. They are scaffolding. Without them, I am a moving house in a storm. My superior says I have a voice, and I laugh. It's only air shaping syllables. But she insists. You pray like you are stitching, she tells me. Tight and careful, and somehow warm. She asks me to lead intercessions during Mass, to guide rosary in the evenings, to record reflections for our small parish email group. I say yes because obedience is a language too. Most days are ordinary. I like ordinary. I scrub pots until light returns to their bellies. I sweep the hallway, and the dust lifts like tiny gray birds. I correct spelling in the girls' journals. Ache, not ache. Enough, not enough. I tie ribbons. I change sheets after nightmares. I learn the shape of fear in a child's shoulder. I learn how to hold it without squeezing. The girls tease me about my radio voice. They say my Hail Mary sounds like a lullaby their mothers forgot. It makes them sleepy. Sister, one of them whispers, on a night loud with rain, say the one about still waters. I recite Psalm 23 softly, and her breath deepens into trust. I don't think of power. I think of kindness arriving through a small door, wearing no shoes. I am careful with microphones. When the parish asked for audio reflections, I borrowed an old phone and placed it between the prayer book and the wooden pew. No effects, no music, only the room and its patient echo. I learned quickly that recordings do not love honesty. They love distance. Too near, and my breath smudges the words. Too far, and the words break apart. So I choose the middle, where humility lives. The city loves to test our middle. The chapel windows tremble when jeepneys cough up the hill. Tricycles argue with the rain. Somewhere, a karaoke machine swallows the first verse and spits out the second. Manila is a choir without rehearsal, but sometimes I catch it in a generous mood. The fans set to low, the crickets on a gentle rhythm, the girls whispering in their sleep. In those moments, my voice doesn't lead. It leans. It leans into the shape the night already made. I carry a notebook in my apron pocket, not to write sermons, but to trap small mercies before they fly away. A girl sharing her pain de sal with another girl who lost her appetite. A volunteer repairing a broken drawer as if it were a wound. The scent of sampaguita mixed with floor cleaner. I write them down because memory has slippery hands. Later, I turn some into prayer. Not eloquent, just honest. Thank you for teaching me that repair can be quiet. Forgive me for enjoying praise more than gratitude. Help me remember that awe is a kind of discipline. The sisters are kind, and kind has a texture. It is the way they leave the last mango slice in the bowl, the way they do not correct you in public, the way they pray for your unconfessed envy and do not ask for details. We argue about rice budgets, about whether the girls should keep their phones, but we end every quarrel with the same tired truth. Love costs a little more than we planned, and we will pay it anyway. On Fridays, I take the early bus to Quiapo to buy candles. The sidewalk preachers compete with vendors, and every corner smells like devotion, wax, sweat, fried saba, damp newspapers. I buy the simple candles. The cheap ones burn fast, like short songs. The girls prefer them because they like to watch the flame hurry. See, they say, it knows where it's going. I nod. A quick prayer still counts. Sometimes a stranger asks me to bless an object, a bracelet, a photograph, a USB stick like a silver fish. I say a small prayer and smile. Faith travels on odd vehicles. Once, a mother pressed her earbuds into my hand and said, "Sister, listen." I heard a voice murmuring a rosary. It was steady, like a heartbeat behaved into words. "This helps me sleep," she said, "when my husband drinks." We both stood there, facing the traffic, and listened to faith pass through wire. I go back to the home before noon and prepare lesson plans. I underline verbs. I sharpen pencils until the bin looks like a tiny forest of orange bark. I stack the notebooks like bricks around a future none of us can see. I do not think of fame. I think of keeping the girls fed, of paying the water bill, of persuading the unreliable pump to be reliable one more day. My voice is a tool. It does not belong to me any more than the mop does. At dusk, I sit again in the chapel and test the room with a word: peace. The word moves across the pews like a small animal crossing the road, alert, hopeful, unafraid of being seen. I press record on the old phone and begin, because somewhere, someone is waiting for evening to be less heavy. Lord, I say, teach us to rest without guilt, to carry our worries like baskets that can be set down. I speak slowly enough for a tired woman to breathe with me, for a man on a night shift to close his eyes without fear, for a child who is angry at God to feel safe near the name. When I finish, I leave the file on the parish group. A few blue hearts appear, a folded hands emoji, sometimes a thank you from a name I don't recognize. I feel grateful and a little embarrassed, like an unplanned birthday song. I bow to the empty room, then to the door, then to the sky. Habit. Reverence is also choreography. I do not yet know what waits beyond the chapel's threshold. I do not know about microphones that never sleep, about strangers who will push my voice into their rooms like perfume, about the way the city will soon pronounce me famous when all I wanted was less noise inside. For now, it is simple. The girls are settling. The fans whir. The notebook is fat with small mercies. My voice is an instrument borrowed from God and returned each night. Tomorrow will ask for it again. Tomorrow, I will say yes. It began with the parish laptop overheating. A glitch, we thought. A simple machine rebellion during a long Sunday upload. Brother Nico, who handled our modest website, sighed and said he'd store my recordings somewhere safer, somewhere cloud-based. I didn't ask where. I trusted the word safe the way one trusts a locked confessional. You assume it means silence. For weeks, nothing changed. I continued praying into my borrowed phone, adjusting the angle, marking the moments when the fan clicked off so my voice could move unbothered. I saved each file into a folder labeled Quiet Hours, a small joke. Only later did I realize irony has a divine sense of timing. Then, one evening, a volunteer named Carla came by the home with a tablet in her hand. "Sister Maria, listen," she said, smiling like she was carrying good news. She tapped the screen, and there it was, my own voice, steady and low, whispering, "Peace is the sound between storms." But beneath it, there was something else. Soft chimes, faint reverb, a heartbeat pulse. The video title read, "Divine ASMR, the nun who calms nightmares." 1,000,000 views. I froze. Carla laughed. "You're trending. People say you heal their anxiety. It's beautiful, beautiful." The word stung. I'd heard it used for sunsets, paintings, dead children dressed in white, never for stolen prayers. I told myself it was harmless. After all, it was just my voice, not my name, not my face. Perhaps God uses strange messengers now, algorithms instead of angels. Maybe comfort is comfort, even when pirated. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing my own words echoing in someone else's room. My breath played through plastic speakers, looped by strangers who had no idea I was just a woman trying not to unravel. A week later, an envelope arrived for me. Inside, a printed email. "Sister, your voice saved me. I listen every night. Please never stop." No signature, no return address, only a postmark from Davao. I felt my heart fold in two. Half gratitude, half guilt. It's dangerous. The kind of power you never asked for but can't refuse. Soon the recordings began to multiply. Versions in Spanish, Japanese, even Russian. Subtitled prayers I never wrote. Each one with ads before and after. Faith monetized in 30-second intervals. I told myself again, maybe this is God's will. Maybe He wants His words to travel further than my small chapel could reach. But the justifications came too easily, like cheap incense. All smoke, no scent. At dinner, the other sisters noticed I'd grown quieter. "Are you ill, Maria?" "No, just tired," I said. I couldn't tell them the truth, that I felt divided, half flesh, half file. In confession that week, I tried to speak of it. "Father," I began, "what if something holy becomes popular?" He smiled. "Popularity is not sin, sister." "Vanity is." I nodded, pretending to agree. But how do you know when gratitude turns into vanity, when prayer becomes performance? Curiosity is a patient tempter. One night, after lights out, I borrowed the office computer. I typed "Divine AASMR Nun" into the search bar. Page after page unfolded like a silent choir. 10 hours of holy whispering, relaxation from the Philippines, original angelic voice, Sister Maria,
fan at it. There were hundreds of comments beneath each one. She makes me cry every night. Her voice is proof of heaven. Ad-free version available on Patreon. That last one stopped me cold. Someone was profiting from peace. The next morning, I approached the parish IT office. "Nico," I said carefully, "where are my recordings stored?" He shrugged. "You know, a few drives, Google Cloud, maybe Sound Temple. Why? Can you check if anyone downloaded them?" He laughed. "Sister, once something's online, it's everywhere. Everywhere." That word hung in the air like incense gone sour. The girls began humming my prayers during chores. "Your voice is famous now," one giggled. I wanted to tell her fame is just another form of hunger. It feeds on attention and leaves the soul thin. Instead, I smiled and said, "Don't believe everything the internet says." But secretly, I began to listen too. Late at night, I'd press play on one of the videos. My own voice poured out, detached and flawless, polished by filters. It was me, but not me. It was serenity without struggle, faith without fatigue. I envied her, that version of me who never trembled. Soon, I began altering my prayers, softening the consonants, lowering my tone, pacing the pauses more deliberately. I told myself it was for clarity, for the listeners who might find peace. But I knew. I was performing. I was feeding the algorithm. When the donations started arriving, anonymous envelopes with pesos, dollars, even euros, I faced another dilemma. The parish believed they were for the orphanage, but I knew they were offerings to a voice, not to God. I placed them in the donation box anyway. Each bill a quiet bribe to my conscience. By Lent, the videos had crossed continents. A company from Singapore reached out through email. "We would love to collaborate on a meditation album. The world needs your peace." I didn't reply, but the idea haunted me. The thought of an album, physical, real, something I could hold. Proof that my prayers mattered. At night, I caught myself rehearsing introductions. "Good evening, my children." No, too proud. "Peace be with you." Too formal. Finally, "You are safe." 3 words. Perfect for playback. I began recording more, not for the parish anymore, but for that invisible audience out there, the sleepless, the lost, the curious. I began to imagine their faces, their dark rooms glowing faintly, my voice pulsing in their ears, and somewhere, deep inside, pride curled like smoke. The first time I heard my voice in public was in a cafe. I had come to meet a donor who wanted to sponsor school books. The speaker above us hummed softly, familiar cadence, familiar pause. My throat tightened. It was my prayer. "Teach us to rest without guilt," now looping under an ad for coconut milk. I excused myself and ran to the restroom. The mirror didn't lie. I was trembling, not from fear, but from a strange shame I couldn't name. I wanted to smash the speaker. I wanted to silence the world. But I also wanted to listen again. When I returned, the donor smiled and said, "You sound exactly like her." I smiled back. "Who?" He laughed. "The nun online, the famous one. My wife listens to her every night." My pulse stuttered. I said, "Maybe God works in echoes." Back in the chapel that evening, I sat before the microphone again. The fan clicked, the light flickered, and I pressed record. "My Lord," I whispered, "what happens when your name becomes a hashtag?" I didn't expect an answer, but I swear, the silence that followed felt heavier than any reply.
They said fame was noise, but I learned it begins in silence. In the moment you realize the world is listening, and you decide to let it. The first real money arrived on a humid morning in May, an envelope with a handwritten note. For Sister Maria, your voice keeps me alive. From Japan inside, 10 crisp 1,000 yen bills, wrapped in a small silk ribbon. No sender's name, only a post office mark blurred by heat. I brought it to Mother Superior. She smiled, misreading my trembling hands. Such generosity. The Lord moves hearts in mysterious ways. I wanted to confess everything, that I didn't know this donor, that I feared what I had become. But her joy was radiant, childlike. It silenced me. We used the money to buy a new roof fan for the dormitory. The girls slept cooler that week. Guilt is easier to bear when it feeds someone else's comfort. The offers grew stranger. Companies wanted to license my tone. Audio platforms requested exclusive prayers. An agent from Makati, slick hair, soft handshake, said he could turn me into the Philippine voice of meditation. He brought contracts, percentages, even mock-up album covers. Whispers of grace. My name printed in gold serif. A small microphone glinting beside a rosary. I laughed at first, but his words lingered. You have no idea how much the world needs you. You could heal millions. Heal. The word struck something deep. It sounded noble, sanctified, the perfect disguise for ambition. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I didn't pray. I practiced. I began recording after midnight, when the convent was asleep. I closed the chapel door, dimmed the candles, and placed a towel under the phone to muffle echoes. My voice became softer, smoother, rounder, a calculated calm. I studied breathing patterns on YouTube, learned where to pause, how to let silence swell just enough to make strangers weep. Soon, my prayers stopped belonging to faith. They belonged to rhythm. One evening, a visiting donor brought a professional microphone, a sleek black cylinder that glowed when touched. He called it a gift for the ministry. I thanked him, pretending not to notice that it recorded in 4K clarity, catching even the faint tremor between syllables. That night, I whispered into it for hours. When I replayed the file, the sound filled the room like perfume, warm, narcotic. I felt powerful. The kind of power priests warn you about, the one that wears humility like perfume. Soon, I was uploading directly, anonymously, using fake names. I wanted to hear how far my voice could travel without habit or veil. Within weeks, one channel gained 200,000 followers. They called me the unknown sister. They speculated about my face, my past, my miracles. Some said I healed sleep paralysis. Others claimed I predicted rain through tone. Each lie became another candle lit in my honor. I began to enjoy it, to crave it. I watched statistics rise the way gamblers watch dice roll. 1,000 views, 10,000, 1,000,000. Every heart emoji, a rosary bead I didn't have to count. Every subscriber, a new confession I didn't have to hear. The first time someone recognized my voice in person, it was at the market. A vendor selling candles stopped mid-sentence. "Wait, say that again?" I repeated my order, 3 packs of white candles. She gasped, touching her chest. "You're her, the nun from online. My daughter listens to you every night." She pressed an extra candle into my hand. "For blessings." I walked home trembling. Blessings. Was that what this was? I didn't know anymore, but my pulse wouldn't calm, and that frightened me less than it should have. With each upload, I grew bolder. I began mixing in verses that weren't scripture, lines from poetry, fragments of longing I didn't dare call desire. I spoke of loneliness, of hunger, of skin remembering touch. Listeners called it sacred sensuality. They wrote to me about healing through softness. No one realized the prayers were slipping, inch by inch, into confession. I started deleting older files, the innocent ones, too plain, too simple. Faith without ornament no longer satisfied me. I replaced them with slower recordings, heavy with breath, intimate as a whisper behind the ear. They called it divine realism. I called it market awareness. The money kept coming, anonymously, discreetly, always through envelopes or crypto transfers labeled donation. The parish never questioned the surge in funds. God is multiplying our resources, Mother Superior said. And I nodded, because how could I explain that the Lord now spoke in PayPal notifications? We built new classrooms, we fixed the roof, we bought more rice, and yet every time I watched the girls eat, I tasted ash. They were being fed by something unholy, my disguised sin. But sin, when well packaged, resembles service. At night, I stayed awake, replaying my latest uploads, watching comments appear in real time. I felt her breath. It saved me. She's the sound of forgiveness. Her silence is erotic. That last one I read 3 times. Then I closed my eyes. The air inside the chapel felt too thick to breathe. Was I praying or performing, saving or seducing? It didn't matter anymore. The microphone didn't care. Then came the call from Singapore again. This time, not a proposal, a demand. They had assembled an entire digital spirituality brand around my recordings, merchandise, live meditations, even VR confessions. They wanted me to record 20 new tracks in exchange for a share of the profits. All I had to do was read the script they sent. Each line began with, "My child." Each ended with a marketing slogan. I stared at it for hours. Somewhere between blasphemy and branding, my own name disappeared. Still, I recorded. The shame had already grown numb. I delivered every line flawlessly, even the one that said, "Your piece can be purchased for only $2.99 a month." The studio engineer wept afterward. He said, "That was divine." I smiled. It was rehearsed. When I returned to the convent, the girls ran to greet me. One of them clutched a phone, playing a remix of my latest prayer, set to lo-fi beats, my voice echoing over rain sounds. "Sister, it's you! We study better with your voice." The irony was unbearable. I taught them about silence, about humility. Now they were studying holiness through noise. I wanted to shout. Instead, I listened. Because even now, it was still beautiful. The music, the laughter, the worship, even corruption, when wrapped in comfort, sounds like salvation. That night, I sat before the microphone one last time. I didn't script it. I didn't breathe between lines. I just spoke. "Forgive me," I said, "for turning your voice into mine. Forgive me for selling the sound of grace." Then I pressed upload and went to bed. By dawn, it had 300,000 views. By noon, it had sponsors. And that evening, when I walked through the mall, I heard it playing on repeat. My own confession, remixed, commercialized, advertising a line of scented candles. The world clapped. I stood still. The applause sounded like thunder underwater, distant, hollow, wrong. But somewhere inside me, A small, traitorous voice whispered, "Listen, Maria, they finally hear you." It happened in waves, not all at once. Collapse never arrives like thunder. It seeps in quietly, through the cracks you swore were harmless. The first crack appeared when a girl from the orphanage stopped praying aloud. Lara, 12, the one who used to hum every psalm. She started wearing earphones during chores. When I asked what she was listening to, she smiled shyly. "Your voice, sister. It helps me feel close to God." But when I asked to hear it, what came through those small white buds wasn't prayer. It was one of my stolen recordings, slowed, edited, layered with soft moans, the title flashing like a wound. "The Nun Who Whispers Desire." My chest hollowed. "Where did you get this?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's everywhere." Everywhere. That word again, my curse. That night, I searched the internet. There were thousands of versions. Divine sleep, holy craving, confession loops. Each clip reshaped my breath into something obscene. Even my silence had been remixed into rhythm. I scrolled until my hands shook. The comments beneath them were not prayers. They were fantasies, requests, worship of a sound they thought holy, now turned into hunger. My voice, the same one that had comforted crying girls, now filled bedrooms, not chapels. And I had built the bridge that carried it there. I stopped recording after that. I told the parish I was ill, that my throat was raw, that I needed silence for recovery. No one questioned me, but the silence I wanted didn't come, because the world kept playing me. Every jeepney, every cafe, every phone in the dormitory seemed to hum my cadence. Even when it wasn't me, I heard myself. Every gentle female whisper on the radio, every YouTube ad about calmness. I had infected the air. Once I walked through Quiapo again. Vendors were selling USB drives labeled the Holy Sleep Collection. I picked one up. It was my own voice, compressed into plastic, sold for 50 pesos beside pirated movies. "Good for meditation, sister," the vendor said. I bought 10 and threw them into the Pasig River. They floated for a moment, then sank, like cheap miracles returning to the mud. Weeks passed. Mother Superior called me in. She looked troubled. "Maria, the diocese has been asking about your recordings." My throat went dry. "What recordings?" "They said your voice is being used in ways that dishonor the cloth." She couldn't even say the word. I wanted to scream that I hadn't consented, that I was the victim too, but the guilt was heavier than truth, because somewhere inside, I had started it. I had tasted the sweetness of attention. Now the bitterness was mine to swallow. "I'll handle it," I said. She nodded, eyes tired. "You must pray for strength." The world forgets how sacred sound can be. Her disappointment hurt more than any punishment could. That night, I locked myself in the chapel. The candles flickered nervously. I sat before the microphone, my betrayer, my mirror. I wanted to destroy it, to crush it beneath the wooden pew, but my hands refused. Instead, I pressed record. No prayer this time, no script, just breathing, heavy, uneven, human. Then I whispered, "I am not your peace. I am your echo." I deleted it after, or thought I did. A few days later, I found it uploaded, again somehow, on a new channel titled Forbidden Frequency, The Lost Prayer of Sister Maria. 500,000 views, thousands of comments. She sounds possessed. She's transcending guilt. I dream in her rhythm. The world had turned my repentance into entertainment. Even my silence had sponsors. Sleep abandoned me. I began hearing whispers in the walls, faint loops of my own voice, like a haunting. The fans hummed in my tone. The girls' laughter warped into playback. I pressed my palms against my ears, but even my pulse followed the old rhythm. Inhale, exhale, whisper, rest. My voice had colonized me. At dawn, I stood before the mirror, still wearing my habit. For the first time, I couldn't recognize the woman inside it. She looked rehearsed, as if holiness were a costume she forgot how to remove. I wanted to cry, but even my sobs came out measured, like another recording. The church's investigation began quietly. A bishop summoned me for questioning. He played one of the viral clips through a small speaker, my own voice sighing words I never said. He paused at mid-breath and asked, "Is this you, Sister Maria?" I nodded. "Then what are these other sounds?" "I don't know," I said. "Not anymore." He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The internet is a labyrinth, sister. You have wandered too far into it." "I wanted to help people sleep," I whispered. "And now you've woken them into sin." The sentence struck harder than any penance. I left the room shaking. Outside, the Manila sky was white and merciless. In the weeks that followed, the parish suspended my duties. The sisters avoided me, not cruelly, just carefully, as if guilt were contagious. The girls asked when I would lead prayers again. I told them soon, but my voice betrayed me. It cracked, turned hoarse, refused the melody of devotion. When I opened my mouth in the chapel, only static came out. A brittle rasp, the kind of sound microphones hate. And yet, somewhere online, I was still speaking perfectly. Flawless tone, endless serenity. New uploads appearing every few days. Someone was recreating me. Or maybe I had multiplied too well. One afternoon, I received another envelope. Inside was a check, 500,000 pesos, with a note. "Your latest prayer broke 10 million views. Grateful for your service." No sender, no address, only a watermark shaped like an angel wearing headphones. I stared at it until my vision blurred. That much money could feed the home for a year, maybe 2, or it could bury my soul forever. I burned the check. The flames curved beautifully, like sound made visible. But the smell, that mix of ink and greed, stayed in the room long after. That night, I walked to the chapel one last time. It was empty, except for the flickering statue of the Virgin, the one with chipped paint on her palms. I knelt and whispered, "Mother, they've stolen my prayers." The statue said nothing, but the candle beside her sputtered, as if even wax knew sorrow. I pressed my forehead to the floor and sobbed. Not for the fame, not for the scandal, but for the sound. The sacred sound I had turned into noise. Somewhere outside, a tricycle passed, playing a ringtone of my own voice, saying, "You are safe." I laughed through tears. It was grotesque and holy, the way irony always is. By morning, I made my decision. I packed my few belongings, rosary, notebook, one small recorder. I left a letter on the altar. "Do not search for me. My voice has already gone ahead." Then I walked into the city, blending into its relentless hum. Each street corner echoed faint fragments of myself. It felt like penance, to be haunted by the sound I once sold. The last thing I remember from that day was a boy selling pirated discs near Quiapo shouting, "Ma'am, want the new Divine ASMR? The nun returns." I turned away. For once, I did not answer. Silence was supposed to save me. It didn't. It only changed shape. I left Manila before dawn. No announcement, no farewell. Just a small bag and a borrowed umbrella. I took the first southbound bus, the kind that carries tired vendors and students, not fugitives. I sat by the window, watching the city shrink into a trembling necklace of lights. Every engine hum sounded like playback. Every brake hiss whispered my name. I told myself this was penance, not escape, but atonement. I needed to find a place where no one had ever heard my voice. By the time the sun rose, we were deep in Batangas, where the hills roll down toward the sea and cell signals disappear. I rented a room in a convent near the coast. It wasn't truly a convent, more a retreat house run by quiet women who liked gardening more than gossip. They didn't recognize me. They didn't have Wi-Fi. It was perfect. The first night there, the ocean was louder than my thoughts. It roared against the cliffs like God clearing his throat. I tried to pray, but my voice faltered. I realized I no longer trusted it. It had betrayed too many people, including me. So I began to pray in my head. No sound, no breath, only intention. Days passed like this. I helped clean the gardens, swept sand from corridors, washed dishes with salt water. The rhythm of small duties began to rebuild something inside me. Something slower, humbler, truer. But guilt is a patient tide. It returns each night, carrying debris from the life I left behind. One afternoon, Sister Lucia, the eldest among them, asked, "Why do you never sing at Vespers?" Her voice was kind, not accusing. I told her I'd lost my voice. She smiled knowingly. No one loses a voice, child. Sometimes we just stop believing it's still ours. Her words sat with me for days. Could I reclaim it? Could something so corrupted ever be pure again? I started keeping a journal, not with words but with drawings. The shape of waves, the outline of hands folded in rest, the curve of an ear listening to nothing. It was strange comfort, speaking through lines instead of sound. But silence has a flavor too, and I was beginning to taste it again. Bitter, clean, human. Weeks turned into months. I heard rumors from visitors. The divine ASMR trend had faded. The channels that used my voice were flagged and taken down. A new sensation had replaced me. A monk from Thailand, perhaps. Or an AI-generated digital saint. The world had moved on. And for the first time in years, I felt invisible again. It was terrifying. And then, it was beautiful. One evening, while cleaning the small chapel by the sea, I found an old tape recorder. It still worked, faintly, its play button sticky with age. I pressed record and spoke softly. I am here. Nothing more. No verse, no blessing, just proof. When I replayed it, I expected shame or nausea, but all I heard was wind in the background and the faint tremor of a woman who was learning to forgive herself. I smiled. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. And that was enough. Months later, a journalist came searching. He had tracked down the story, the missing nun from Manila. He said people still whispered about me, that my disappearance had become legend. He asked if I would grant him an interview. I told him I couldn't. He begged, "At least record a statement. The world wants to know you're alive." The world. the same one that had swallowed me, spit me out, and remixed my faith into background noise. I looked at him and said, "Tell them I'm not gone. Tell them I'm just learning how to listen again." He nodded, perhaps disappointed by the lack of drama, and left. That night, I prayed again. Not for forgiveness this time, but for quiet courage, to remain unknown. Sometimes I still walk by the shore, and children pass carrying Bluetooth speakers that leak songs into the air. Now and then, a familiar tone emerges, a prayer that once belonged to me. It doesn't hurt as it used to. I no longer feel ownership. A voice, once released, is like salt. It dissolves into everything, indistinguishable, necessary. I think about the girls at the orphanage, their laughter echoing through narrow halls. I wonder if they still listen to those old files before bed. If they do, I hope they fall asleep not because of me, but despite me.
The sea teaches you the same lesson over and over. You cannot hold the sound. You can only float inside it for a while, and then let it pass through you. I have stopped recording, but sometimes, in the quietest hours before dawn, I catch myself whispering again. Not into a microphone, just into the air. Old prayers, half-remembered psalms, even fragments of the words I once sold. Only now, no one is listening. And somehow, that feels like the first true prayer I've ever made. The last entry in my journal reads, "If God ever speaks again, I hope he sounds nothing like me." It took a year before I dared to visit Manila again. The bus ride back felt like returning to a dream that had learned how to wound. Outside the window, the skyline looked taller, hungrier, a choir of glass and steel humming with new sins and old prayers. I carried only a small backpack, a rosary, and a single purpose, to make peace with the echoes I had left behind. The orphanage had not changed much. The walls still smelled faintly of detergent and dried sea breeze. The mango tree still bent toward the gate like an old friend waiting for forgiveness. A new sister answered the door, young, cheerful, unscarred. She didn't recognize me at first. When I told her my name, her eyes widened. "You're her." She led me inside. The girls had grown taller. Some were gone, some new. Their laughter still danced around the hallways like birds that refused cages. I walked slowly, tracing the grooves of the floorboards I used to sweep. Each creak was a memory speaking softly, not accusing, just remembering. In the chapel, dust motes floated in sunlight like slow-moving grace. The microphone was gone. Only a wooden cross remained, slightly crooked. I stood there, and for the first time, the silence didn't punish me. It invited me. Mother Superior had retired. She lived in a small room overlooking the courtyard, her hands thinner but her eyes still sharp. When she saw me, she smiled without surprise. "I knew you'd return," she said. "The sea never keeps its pilgrims forever." I knelt beside her. I came to apologize. For what, child? For confusing my voice with his. She reached out, touching my face with the same calm she used to bless the girls. "God doesn't mind echoes, Maria. He only minds pride. You mistook attention for purpose. Many do." Her forgiveness was quiet, unceremonious. It didn't erase the past. It simply stopped sharpening it. That evening I stayed to help with Vespers. The new sisters sang softly, unsure of my presence. When the final hymn ended, they asked if I would lead a closing prayer. I hesitated. Fear rose like a ghost from my chest. But then I remembered Sister Lucia's words. No one loses a voice. So I spoke. No microphone, no filters, just air and breath and the trembling courage to exist. Lord, I said, thank you for the noise that teaches us to love silence. Thank you for the world's hunger that teaches us the worth of stillness. And if my voice ever reaches where it shouldn't, let it at least carry your mercy with it. When I finished, there was no applause, no recording light, only the rustle of habits, the shifting of feet, the sigh of shared relief. It was enough. In the days that followed, I stayed on quietly, teaching the younger sisters how to record sermons responsibly, how to separate devotion from digital hunger. I told them to leave pauses between sentences, to let the silence breathe, I said. That's where God hides. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find the girls listening to their new recordings. Fresh voices, uncertain, kind. They no longer used my old files. They had made their own. It filled me with a tender ache, the way a mother feels when she realizes her children have learned to pray without her. One afternoon, a student approached me holding a phone. "Sister, this one's from you, right?" She pressed play. A familiar whisper emerged. "You are safe." My chest tightened, but it wasn't my recording. Someone else had said it, someone imitating me. The tone was gentler, the breath cleaner. For the first time, I didn't feel stolen, I felt replaced. And that too was mercy. I've learned that redemption isn't a return to purity. It's the acceptance of impurity's lesson, the humility of being human, flawed, fragile, forgiven. My voice once circled the world as a counterfeit prayer. Now it only circles the chapel as a whisper among many. And that is enough for me. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the courtyard, it hums softly, as if the air itself remembers. The girls say it sounds like a lullaby. I just smile and let them believe. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the last recording that truly mattered, the one I never made, the one that belongs to silence. Before I sleep, I write one last entry in my journal. I used to pray to be forgotten. Now I pray to be remembered truthfully, not as a saint, not as a sinner, but as a voice that learned, at last, to listen.